Hey, we are live. This is Bill Brock with you, and this is also Stephanie Kelley Romano, and we are here on Operation Lockdown. I think this is like day 7,612 or something. Like it feels like an eternity. Like I need human contact, but yeah, it's only a matter of time. We'll be back to normal, I think. But anyway, how are you doing, Stephanie?
I'm doing great.
Nice.
It's a
So,
beautiful sunny day. I went out in my garden this morning, so it's a good day.
it is a good day. It is beautiful out. I mean, it's a little chilly, but you know, it is Maine. But it is at the end of April, so I don't know. There's got to be some warm weather coming soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we sometimes get snow about now, though. I know. Sorry.
Don't say that. But so, how have you been handling the whole lockdown thing?
Well, I teach at Bates College, and we moved.
You just had to throw that in there. You just
throw it in, Bates. And we moved to remote learning in the middle of March, like March 13th, I think. Friday the 13th was the day we sent the kids home. And so we had a week after that to kind of scramble and figure out how we were going to finish our semester. So then I have two teenage boys at home, and they both got sent home for the rest of the school year. So I have been envious of people who are posting on Facebook that they're bored, because I've been like busy trying to manage all these people.
Yeah, I bet. So what's it like to go from being a professor in class to now needing to do all this stuff from home? What's that look like?
Well, and of course, the last 5 years, I've been moving all of my work stuff from home to work to try to have like a workspace and a home space. So I didn't have anything at home. So I didn't even have a stapler. And like, in week 2 or week 3, when stuff was still really unsettled, I couldn't find a stapler. I started bawling my head off, and I was just like, I can't do this. But it's gotten better. We meet on Zoom. We're doing the virtual meetings and everything, but I've been reading all kinds of stuff about how they're just so much harder because you're not with people, and you can't usually in a conversation, and you've probably noticed this, usually in a conversation, people like talk over each other and they get excited and it's interactive. Whereas with Zoom, it only really allows for one person to talk at a time. And so then it chops out in this really awkward way, and like it stops everything. So just kind of getting used to the rhythm of electronic conversation has been a lot.
Weird.
It's weird. It's a lot. It's a lot more exhausting. It's a lot more exhausting to try to teach virtually than to teach face to face. Like face to face, you get energized and you leave class and you're like, bam. But I leave Zoom and I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. There's something about like the energy that you put out into the world, like and that energy's felt in the room that you're in, and so like you can kind of transfer that back and forth and kind of play off each other is great. It's really cool. But I think this is our new normal. I think this is probably what we're going to have to do, at least for, I'm guessing, the year. I hate to say it, but I think that it's going to take at least a year for us to get back to normal, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can come up with creative solutions, as long as we stay in small groups and stay far away. Wash our hands.
People aren't doing that here.
No,
have you been out like wandering around? Like, have you been out?
I was walking my dog and I'm like, people, 6 feet. I tried to go to the grocery store. Nobody follows the rules with the little aisles and the arrows. I had a woman coming at me down one of the aisles coughing. I'm like, yeah, I am out of here. I do not need anything that
I would have been like, no. Get away. But yeah, hopefully it gets back to normal. But so let's
own food.
It might be that way. Like we might need to do that. We might need to think about that.
Chickens.
My sister's thinking about chickens. Yeah.
Chickens
so like
cool.
Yeah, they eat ticks. They give you eggs. You can eat them. Like, yeah, it works. Just don't get goats. Goats are bad.
Goats are cute though, but yeah, no.
Yeah. So anyway, so who are you, Stephanie? Like, for the people out here in the whole streamland, who are you, and where do you come from? Like, just tell me about yourself.
So, I grew up just north of Boston.
Oh yeah. Did you ever see The
I
Jerk? That movie, The Jerk, with Steve Martin?
I I did, but I'm not remembering it.
So every time somebody asks me, they're like, well, tell me about yourself. Like, I'd love to know about you. And it reminds me, the opening line of The Jerk is so bad. He's Steve Martin, and he's like, I was born a poor black child. And so it shows him, he was adopted by a black family, you know, like he thinks he's black. So like every time somebody says it, The Jerk pops into my head. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry about that. I do.
That's fine. I am from I'm from Massachusetts. I I just grew up regular and then went to kept going to graduate school basically to kind of avoid getting a job because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like good at school, so I'm like, okay, I'll keep doing this. Got a PhD and then wanted to be
You have a PhD? You're like a doctor? Wow.
That's right.
Nice.
I know. And then so that I wanted to be near my parents. And so tried to find a job back in New England and got a job at Bates, which is perfect. It's like 2 hours away. And then just started teaching. And when I was in graduate school, this is how I got into the UFO and alien stuff and conspiracy. When I was in graduate school, I loved the show The X-Files. I like totally loved it. And I was obsessed. And in graduate school, you don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to do stuff if it's not like towards your academic goals. So I figured I needed to write about it. That way I had a reason to have to watch it all the time. And so I started writing about conspiracy. So I write a lot about conspiracy and conspiracy theories and conspiracies on television and stuff. And then I was trying to think about what I wanted to write a dissertation on. And I didn't want to do like, I'm in rhetoric, I'm in argument and persuasion, communication studies. And I didn't want to do like dead presidents or white dudes of any sort. And I was really interested in stories and the stories that people tell. And I was really fascinated on the X-Files by the abductees, by people who think they've been abducted by aliens. And I was like, I want to write about that. You know, I want to interview people who think they've been abducted by aliens. And my graduate advisor's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't it be cool? And he was supportive. And so I did it. And I did it without really thinking. Like I wasn't being super strategic about my career or anything like this. And so I didn't really think about what it would be like trying to get a job being like the UFO girl, which I basically was, right? Because I'm like this academic. And, but I got, Bates has let me teach all kinds of, I teach a class on conspiracy. I teach a class on alien abduction. So it's just been really cool. And that's why I've been doing that for.
I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you. It's this weird thing. So you were, you coughed.
Allergies. I haven't been out.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. So it's kind of interesting to me that you basically got your start from watching X-Files. So was there a specific episode or anything, or was it just like the coolness of these investigators going out and like looking into this weird stuff? Like, is that what?
Totally. Like when I was younger, I watched Kolchak the Night Stalker. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Oh my gosh. I just can't even with people who haven't seen it. Kolchak the Night Stalker. He was like the first like kind of paranormal investigator, but he was like Columbo and X-Files combined. I used to watch it with my dad. It's like an amazing show. I should rewatch it in my quarantine here. But so I was into that. I was into In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, so I always liked the paranormal stuff. And then Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, they're both like super hot, super awesome. I wanted to like be them and date them and have them in my life.
Yeah.
So I was all about it. And I just liked, I guess with the show, what I liked that they would give you just a little bit all the time. Like there was this master arc of alien abduction stuff that drew on like real events, right? So real conspiracies. Roswell was all wrapped up in there. Government was all wrapped up in there. And so I liked kind of that blurry fact fiction kind of space. Yeah, I do too. I love the X-Files. It's definitely one of my favorite shows. It's super cool. Jose Tongues from Outer Space is probably my favorite episode.
Which is it? What is it again?
Jose Chung's From Outer Space. It's really good because there's a guy who's played, I forget who it's played by, but he's writing a book. It's basically, and it's Whitley Strieber's Communion cover, but he's writing a book about alien abduction. And what's so cool about the show, that particular episode, is at first he's interviewing Scully, but then he interviews someone who thinks they've been abducted by aliens. And it's about these two kids who are abducted and this other kid who wants to be abducted. But the perspective of who's talking keeps changing. And so there are scenes where we see this detective interviewing the kids, and he'll say, I don't believe in no bleeping UFO. And so because it's been bleeped out, we know that it's actually Scully telling the story because she doesn't swear. Whereas if we knew it from his perspective, so to be able to try to figure out whose perspective it is and like whose narrative is being believed is like what I'm all about. So
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Mm-hmm. So, I didn't know that you were really into conspiracy theories. I thought that you were just a UFO girl. I think it's really cool that you're into conspiracy theories. And we were just talking before we got on here a little bit about MK Ultra. That is definitely a conspiracy theory. We know a little bit about that, but like, what is your personal favorite conspiracy theory and why?
Well, see, that's like, I do some with conspiracy theories like JFK. I mean, my favorite's probably the moon landing is a hoax, right?
That was totally a hoax.
That's one of my favorites. But you know, I like all the ones about people who are still alive or people who are dead who are alive, or I like those too. But Elvis. Mostly when I do Elvis, right? Paul McCartney's dead. Tupac's alive, like all kinds of people are dead or alive. But when I do conspiracies now, I do kind of political conspiracies. So I'm doing like anti-vaxxer conspiracies. I did like the birther conspiracy and Trump. So I do a lot of kind of political conspiracies and try to understand like what makes people believe conspiracies. So, but I mean, Ross, so I want to. They're my favorites.
Yeah, it has to be up there. So I want to talk about the moon landing, and I'm guessing that you've probably done a bunch of research on this, and you were kind of like, you know. So first off, do you think it's legit? Did we go to the moon?
Yes, we went to the moon.
Oh my goodness! I'm just gonna have to end this right now. There's no way they got sent down there in an aluminum foil can. Like I just can't. I can't believe it.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I have my students, when I teach the conspiracy class, I have my students watch this thing that advances the moon landing as a hoax conspiracy, right? So we watch this video and they get all this evidence thrown at them about like how it's not real and why it was faked. And so by the end of that week, they're like, the moon landing definitely didn't happen and da-da-da. But then we go through it like piece by piece. And then they're kind of like, oh, yeah, it probably happened. So, I mean, it gets trippy, though, right? Because, like, the whole wag the dog kind of premise, this whole idea that, like, virtually everything we know is through the screen. And so what really happens versus what we experience, there's a huge difference there. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. The moon landing is one of those.
The moon.
That's a tough one. Like, honestly, that one is one that I'm not sure about. Like, I am very like 50-50 on it. There's been too many things that have come forward that just didn't make sense. I don't personally like a lot of what they did on the moon during the time they were filming. Like, it just doesn't look right. The gravity there doesn't seem consistent with what we know about the gravity on the moon. But I don't know. So what do you think? I know that you know more than what you're saying. So like, are there some like things that happen that make you just say, okay, it definitely was legit. Like there's no doubt.
I mean, I think one of my biggest reasons for disbelief in most conspiracy theories is people don't shut up. right? And so I think it's true. I think that if we really didn't go to the moon, then Neil Armstrong or whoever would have been like, hold on.
Bless you.
I swear.
Oh, I'm not
But
doing
I
it.
think, I think there would have been a big expose. Like when Reagan was president, Nancy Reagan couldn't even call the psychic hotline without the media finding out, right? Like we are not good at keeping secrets. Like we do not stay silent well. So I'm just like, yeah. And all the things that initially made me think like, oh my gosh, maybe we didn't land on the moon were really able to be refuted scientifically. So like the flag not waving or like the behavior of anti-gravity not being what I expected really has to do with kind of my own ignorance and kind of my expectation based on sci-fi and not actual science. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because like I see both sides of that, but I also think that the government had a reason to fake it. You know, they were trying to win the space race. They were trying to be the first to get someone on the moon. Every other country was trying to do the same thing. So it's always going to be hard for me to completely buy into it because there were so many reasons for them to fake it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do.
All right, so
but I'm kind of like, just because like the government can be evil and malicious, which I'm not saying that the government as an entity is, but like it could be, but that doesn't mean that they faked it, right?
True.
They could have just lucked out.
True. So how do you feel about Bigfoot? Because I feel like that is a conspiracy theory. Like the Patterson Gimlin film, that video you see of the Bigfoot like walking through the creek. Well, to me, that is also part of it, a larger conspiracy theory about Bigfoot and whether the government actually knows they exist and if they are capturing them and taking them and doing something with them. Do you guys ever talk about that?
We don't talk about Bigfoot. I don't know what. So for me, I base a lot of the conspiracy work I do on this guy's dissertation, Earl Krebs. He wrote a dissertation. It's forever old, and it's about conspiracy as a rhetorical genre. And the thing that he talks about when he talks about conspiracy is this like this evil, right? Like the thing that makes a conspiracy is the motive. There's some sort of evil motive, right? Conspiracies are like, and in my work, especially with rhetoric and political conspiracies, I try to get people to understand the difference between like disinformation, misinformation, and conspiracies, right? So you could have a false belief that vaccines cause autism, but once you add in the government is doing it deliberately to, manipulate us or for mind control, then it becomes a conspiracy. So with Bigfoot strikes me more of like folklore in the sense that it's a story that may or may not be true, that builds community, right? Because then you have people who believe. But I've never heard stories. I haven't researched Bigfoot. I probably will though. But I haven't heard stories about like malicious. The government is like breeding Bigfoot to like scare campers.
No, a lot of conspiracies think that Bigfoot was either an alien and it was sent here in order to help us in some way, like mine things, like whatever. And then I've definitely heard that Bigfoot was created by the government as a super soldier. So like, there's these weird things out there. There's conspiracy theories about everything, but honestly, the one that really stands out for me will always be Roswell. I think that Roswell is the pinnacle of conspiracy theories because there was motivation. There was like definite proof, both sides of the situation, And so, yeah, Roswell, I think is probably the weirdest conspiracy for me because there is so much to point at. There was something that crashed there, but there's also a lot to say that there wasn't,
Yep. Yeah. No.
So how do you feel?
I mean, Roswell's huge. right? Like I've been to Roswell. Have you been to Roswell?
No, I want to go, but I've never been there.
Oh, you gotta go. It's like everything is aliens. They got parking signs with aliens. Their stop signs have like UFOs abducting cows. Like there are UFOs crashed into the side of buildings. The UFO, like the International UFO Museum is there or something. Roswell's awesome. Um, but Roswell's like so much bigger, right? Because something allegedly crashed. Nobody really knows what it was. The rancher who found the material allegedly was being questioned or interrogated, depending on who's telling the story, for several days, right? When he comes back saying that, oh, it was actually nothing. There's the whole media, we found a UFO and then we take it back. It was just a weather balloon. And then the posing with some sort of like tinfoil blanket kind of thing. But then, of course, there's the whole stuff went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or went to Area 51. It's connected to Area 51. It's connected to everything. And so what actually happened, I don't know.
Yeah.
I took the tour of the crash site and everything.
That's pretty awesome. That's definitely
it was,
cool.
Except like I was a little bit disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. So I went there and I was like all pumped, right? Because I'm in Roswell, and I went.
Yeah.
We went to Area 51. We stayed at the Little Alien up there, and we went to Roswell. Went to Snowflake, Arizona. Saw the Very Large Array. Went to like where Travis Walton was abducted. Like did this whole southwestern kind of tour. And when I went to the Roswell crash site, when I've read about Roswell, they always talked about how something had crashed into the side of a mountain. And I went to the crash site and it's super flat. Like it's not, there aren't like big, huge mountains that it wasn't difficult terrain. So I was kind of like, oh.
Yeah, it didn't match what you had kind of pictured in your head, right?
But I think like mountains in the Southwest, well, I still don't think it's a mountain, but terrain in the Southwest maybe is a lot different than New England mountains. Like I'm thinking old man in the mountain.
Yeah, like a big mountain. Yeah, like Mount Washington or something, right? Yeah.
Not like that. Not in Roswell anyway.
Right. So what do you think about the alien autopsy video?
I think the alien autopsy video is not real. Do you think it's real? It's not real.
No, it's great though. They really tried hard to make it look real. I mean, they really put some effort into that. But
I don't. In that episode, Jose Chung's from Outer Space on the X-Files, they give the alien autopsy. Scully, who's a medical doctor, does an autopsy on what they think is an alien, and they intersperse the footage from the alien autopsy video with this, and it's really, you got to watch that episode. It's super cool.
Yeah, I definitely will. 100%. Yeah. So, what other? Oh, Travis Walton. What do you think about that abduction? Like, that one is interesting to me. Yeah, the whole story is weird. Like, it's just weird.
Yeah. So, Travis and his 4 or 5 logging buddies were allegedly coming down, in Snowflake, Arizona, doing a logging contract when they saw a bright light. He gets out of the truck, is zapped by something. They run away in fear, right? And so when they come back, they can't find his body. He's missing for 5 days, which I think is pretty interesting. And Philip Klass has done extensive research on this one as well. And so with Travis, like, I do unfortunately think a lot of it was kind of opportunistic in the sense that an act of God would get them out of the logging contract and they weren't going to make the contract on time, which means they wouldn't have gotten paid. Yeah. So an alien abduction is an act of God, or however they defined it contractually, so that they would have been able to get an extension. Additionally, like Travis and his mother, and I think his brother, all had prior interest in UFOs and had talked about UFOs, and then sold the story to the Inquirer. So part of me wants to be like, well, you can sell your story to whoever you want. And if you need money, like if I need money and the Inquirer is buying, I don't know that I'm not selling. So maybe that's not as strong, but there's a lot of kind of circumstantial evidence that speaks to the idea that he needed to be abducted for a lot more other reasons.
Right.
But I'm skeptical
I
of all
didn't
of
know
this.
that. I didn't know about the logging contract thing. Like,
Yeah.
I've heard this story 100 times, and I've never heard that point come up.
Yeah, Phil
Yeah,
Plath
that's
has a really good book about UFO abductions. It's called UFO Abductions. And he goes through a bunch of different abductions and kind of talks about some of the extra motivational factors or contrary evidence, right? Like the lie detectors. I don't remember how the lie detectors went with Travis Walton. Some of them passed, some of them didn't, kind of thing.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
I believe. Well, I kind of know this to be true. So, like, if you believe your story when you're telling it to a
right,
lie detector, you're going to pass it. And if you tell a story enough times, it then ends up being almost imprinted in your mind as a real memory, and you can
right,
pass a lie detector. So,
yeah,
I don't really have a lot of faith in lie detectors. I just don't. But yeah, it really comes down to like personal stories, whether you are willing to believe these people, and if there is a motivation for them to do something a little shady. One abduction that I find interesting that I don't personally know of any reason why they would say anything is the Allagash abductions. Like
mm-hmm,
they didn't have any reason, any motivation to like. They didn't have a logging contract. They were just up there fishing. So
right.
how do you feel about that one?
I haven't done, which I am probably should be ashamed to admit that I haven't done a ton of research on that one, and it's right here, right? It's right in Maine. Um, but I can see why that one would be more believable in the sense that, and like even with the people, like I've interviewed and collected stories from like over 300 people who say that they've been abducted, and there are some where I don't see any kind of extracurricular motive or any reason or any attention seeking or anything like that. And so those are the ones that are always most compelling to me as
Right.
well. And so the Allagash is probably similar. And when I got the job at Bates, um, so I got the job at Bates, everybody, I've probably told you this 1,000 times, but whenever I go to a party or I go to any type of event, people are like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a professor. What do you teach?" I teach argument. What do you do? What does that mean? "Oh, I interview people who think they've been abducted by aliens." And then I tell a little story or something like that. And then people disperse, right? And everybody's just like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And then they leave.
Right.
But then, of course, and this probably happens to you, people come back, right? And they're
Yes.
like, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but," and then they tell me this story. And like sometimes they tell me a ghost story, sometimes they tell me an alien story. They always have a UFO story. And so, when I got the job at Bates, this guy from the physical plant who, like, I don't know what he does, he builds things or fixes things. He comes in and, he's got his tool belt and all this. So I figure he's going to fix something or put in wires or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Listen, I heard you're the UFO girl." I don't think he said that, but like, "I hear you research UFO
Yeah.
stories." And I'm like, "Well, actually, I research abductions, but it's a big field."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, here's my card because me and a couple of my buddies were up camping up north when we had this encounter with a UFO and da 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 da." And they had missing time. And, um, I talked to him a little bit more about it, but not a lot because he didn't think he was abducted. He just thinks that they saw a UFO. And I do not have enough time to collect UFO accounts too. Like, because there are so many. I teach that class on alien abduction, and every semester there are only 15 students in the class, and every time I teach it, I have at least two students who tell me about a UFO sighting that either they or their immediate family had all the time. And I've had I've had at least 4 or 5 people in the time that I've been there claim that they have had actual abduction experiences. And I had one kid, he did not think that he was an abductee, but, whoop, sorry. But when his mother came for parents' weekend or whatever, she came to my office and, we're just chatting. just casual chatting. I was like distracted trying to get stuff together at the same time because then all of a sudden she started crying about how she is a lifelong experiencer and she's so grateful that her son could have this class because now maybe she can tell him and da 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 da. So the prevalence of people who claim these types of experiences is huge. I had the other one was I was doing at Bates, they oftentimes ask me to give talks about my research because Bates is a very expensive school. And I think the parents, when they scan the curriculum and they see alien abductions and conspiracies, they're like, what?
Yeah.
And so I give my little talk and, you know, allay their fears that no, your children are going to actually learn. But so I gave a talk on alien abduction research and narrative and stories and all that stuff. And afterwards, a guy and his daughter came up and said that one of the reasons that they were looking at Bates is because they're both lifelong experiencers and they like the idea of her being able to take a class about it.
Wow.
So I know, right? I was just like,
that's crazy.
I
You would never think that
expected.
somebody would go to Bates in order to take your class. Like, it's great and congratulations. I think it's amazing.
She
But
didn't
like,
come. I don't think she came.
oh, huh, that's crazy. Yeah, that really is weird. So, out of all the alien abduction cases that you've really researched, which one stands out for you? Like, which one is like, yeah, they were probably abducted? Like, is there one like that?
I have this one woman. First of all, she's an African American woman. And I don't have a ton of African Americans in my sample, right? Like it's primarily Caucasian. It's all white folks. So she's an African American woman. She was adamant that I not share her name or even her story in ways that would make it so that it was discernible, right? I couldn't say where she was from. I couldn't, none of that. And she wrote to me several times, right? Because so, like, a lot of them I collected when I had a survey on the internet, and people would write in their stories. But then I would follow up and I would ask them questions. And I would oftentimes follow up several weeks or months later with a follow up question that I already knew the answer to make sure that it was going to be the right answer. And, like, to a certain degree, people's stories change. You know, confabulation tells us that we fill in missing details and we look for this kind of narrative arc. But like, if you have major changes, I'm kind of like, excuse me, I'm like, no. But so this woman, we had a correspondence for several months. She was brutally consistent. She was level headed in tone. And I think the thing that was so compelling about her story was she didn't assign any significance or meaning, but instead, she was very physical about and very kind of granular in the detail that she offered. And so she would be like, I was lying in bed and I felt tingling as if, you know, as if a cool breeze had come in the window and it was about to rain or something like this, right? And like I could imagine that. And then
Yeah.
she's like, you know, I smelled the smell of sulfur. She's like, it smelled as though someone had lit a match. And I'm like, you know, and so a lot of the things that she said were consistent with other people who claimed to have been abducted, but she didn't she hadn't filled in and made attributions in ways that other people had that made me kind of like, yeah, I can tell you've read John Mack. You know, if you're talking about the ontological shock of abduction, like I know, you know, and if so, so a lot of times I can see influences from other authors or from kind of schools of thought. But with her, she was kind of all over the place with just like telling the pieces of it. So I was like, she had some sort of experience.
Yeah. Did she talk about actually being taken into a craft or anything?
No, that was the other thing too, is she talked about kind of a capture episode in the sense that she talked about beings being in the room. And so like part of me thinks that it was sleep paralysis, but part of me thinks it's like it's way more detailed than many of the other episodes of like sleep paralysis that I've kind of, you know, I've been kind of like, oh, that could be sleep paralysis because she didn't claim to have any trouble breathing. She didn't have anything like on her chest kind of thing, but she could see three figures clearly around her. And they had instruments and used like this wand like thing on her forehead, and that's where she loses consciousness. She hadn't used hypnosis, which again to me is oftentimes a plus in terms of believability, because I think with hypnosis you can very easily be led to believe things that may not have happened and then have that emotional resonance with those memories.
So do you think a hypnotist has the ability to guide where you're going?
Oh,
Is that what you're saying?
totally.
Okay.
Yeah, like the leading questions, like in David Jacobs' book Secret Life, for example, he puts, it's interesting because ever since Betty and Barney Hill's The Interrupted Journey, John Fuller's book, using the actual transcripts of the hypnosis sessions is oftentimes seen as kind of credibility building, right? Because the reader then gets to read all the stuff themselves, and then you feel as though you're putting the pieces together, right? Like you have more agency, you're not being led. But if you look at the, especially in David Jacobs in the Secret Life book, which is why I always cite that one, some of the questions that are being asked, and in the Interrupted Journey as well, it's like there's a huge difference. Memory studies have shown that there's a huge difference between asking someone, what did you see, right? As opposed to saying, what did the craft look like, right? Or like, because you're already like giving them a craft, or like, you know, what color were their eyes, or like what did their heads look like. You're even things as subtle as that are leading in a way in terms of expectation. And I think people's desire for that affirmation in conversation, particularly when telling a personal story, I think that's always there, right? Like we want the person that we're talking to, like you're doing, we want them to be nodding, we want them to be encouraging, we want their approval.
Right.
And it doesn't mean necessarily that like we're weak-willed or we're, you know, desiring to be led, but I think just like we look for that. And so if you go, you know, if you go to a hypnotist who believes in abduction and they ask you what did the being look like, you know,
there's already a being in your head, and that being may be like essentially like a memory of another being that you may have seen on the internet or like TV or whatever. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think memory is so ridiculously fallible, you know, which I didn't even know before I started researching abductions. I mean, the way that kind of if anything, I've gotten more skeptical over the years, because when I first started doing it, I was like, the truth is out there, and you know, we don't know, and we only use 10% of our brain, and you know, the Blessed Virgin Mary shows up on grilled cheese sandwiches, and I was just kind of like all open to it.
Right.
And of course, my personal experiences cloud that as well, right? And like to feel the power of the ocean or the earth is like emotional. And so it's like, how do we make sense of that? And so at first I was really open to lots of different explanations. And then I started reading, like I read Carl Sagan's A Candle in the Dark, The Demon Haunted World. Have you read that? He's
not the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. He's ridiculous. He's like aspirational for me in terms of like the way he writes. He's like so engaging and smart, but not condescending. Like he's respectful of people's beliefs, but also kind of like, hey, you know, let's get a little informed. And so then as I started getting informed and learning about things, I did some work with a psychology professor at Bates, and we did some memory studies and like suggestibility and just the degree to which people believe things. And that kind of merged with the conspiracy stuff that I did, because for conspiracy arguments, there's this really funky thing where if you believe a conspiracy, and they did a study with UFO conspiracies actually, but if you believe a conspiracy and then you read a news article where there's an expert who says the conspiracy is not true, then you actually believe the conspiracy more. It's confirming to you. Yeah, it's confirming. So there are times when refutative expertise actually reinforces false belief. I know, right?
Yeah. You would think it'd be the other way around, you know?
I know, but it kind of makes sense in the sense that it absolutely gives credibility to the story generally, right? Like if the news is even covering it, there must be something to it. And I think it speaks to the degree to which, when we believe conspiracy theories and things like that, how much they're a part of our identity,
Mm,
and like how much we're invested in them. And especially now, I think in the last like 20 years, even longer than that, I'm sure, but like we are at a place culturally where you don't go back, you don't change your mind, right? Like we crucify politicians who change their mind. When we think about it, it's probably a good idea to be adaptable, right? It's probably a good idea to change your mind. But instead, it's like, no, you're a flip-flopper, and no, you're not committed. And so I think that what happens is people believe something, and then that becomes part of who they are, especially if they've publicly acknowledged that's what they believe. And then the
right.
reluctance to kind of dial that back is really high.
Yeah, yeah. We're getting a lot of comments about Travis Walton specifically. Um,
You can see
People, yeah, yeah. Like it comes up on my phone, and
that.
so like, so
I
I
could
can't
see it
bring
if I
this.
look on Facebook. I'm gonna look too.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my friends, her name's Mary, and she runs one of the scariest haunted houses in the world, the SK Pierce Mansion down in Mass. She's fantastic. She's great. She said something about she went to see Travis Walton in Salem about a year ago. He did a lecture about his abduction. She's like, I did really believe his story. So
Did or didn't?
did.
She did or she did?
Yeah, and there's a few people that have said that they believe Travis Walton's story, but you know like I don't really know whether he got abducted or not. Like I know a lot of people that believe he did, and I know a lot of people that believe he didn't. I don't know. Um, I've never met the guy. I've never heard his story out of his mouth, so I can't say whether he's telling the truth or not. But at at the end of the day, there is motivation for him to have fabricated this story, and no matter what, if you tell a story enough times,
Yeah.
you can make it believable. I mean, you can. I tell this I tell this theory of what I think Bigfoot is, and I've told it so many damn times that like hell, I start to believe it now. But like it's you tell something that many times, you're going to be able to tell it really well. So I don't think it's I don't think that hearing someone's story is enough to walk away and just be like, yeah, like I just don't think that. I think you need to be a freaking researcher. Like, if you're going to go and
Well,
listen to this
yeah.
guy's story and hear him and believe him, and then go out and say, okay, he definitely was telling the truth, you need to like do essentially what you did. You need to look at the backstory, see if there was motivation for him to do something wrong, and lie about this. Not to say he did. I don't want a bunch of people yelling at me, but
No, I don't think he's lying. Like
yeah,
I don't know that he's like deliberately creating a falsehood kind of thing. And I think that it makes me think about the difference between things that are real and things that are true. Right? I think that when something is true, when we use that word, it is true. That means that it has met a certain threshold of verifiability, replicability, like verification. Like there's some sort of evidence based information that confirms something, right? And we could talk about how problematic that is in a minute. But truth is that for something to be real, I think it just needs to have consequence, right? So alien abductions, for example, are something that I consider real, but I don't know if they're true. So I have not gotten verification sufficient to convince me that alien abductions are going on. I definitely believe that they're real in the sense that I absolutely honor individuals who claim to have had this experience and believe that they believe. I do not think that the majority of them are manufacturing it. I don't think they're making it up. I don't think they have any profit motive. I think that they are genuine, open minded, usually, unfortunately, already kind of I don't want to say not mainstream, but kind of people who have a tendency to be a little bit more just open to alternative explanations, less followers, that those people believe it. So it's real. But not, and I feel that way about Travis. Like, I think with Travis Walton, he's been at some of the UFO conferences that I've been at, and his story is compelling, right? But I don't know. But see, then some of the other research I also do is around narratives of sexual abuse or harassment, right? And again, then we're getting into the primacy and singularity of individual testimony. And, the hashtag believe her, I believe her, is like my mantra. Like, I'm like, we got to believe women. So how can I reconcile these things? How do we come up with ways in the public discourse to evaluate stories?
Yeah, it's almost like a peer review, right? Like, we need some sort of like almost peer review for this stuff. I guess that's what we're doing, like when he goes to a conference and tells his story, that's a form of peer review, right?
Sure. But then there's also the fact that, like, the standards of evidence or the things that we consider believable are also created by people who arguably have a motive, right? So, like, the fact that we are a rational world paradigm, the fact that we believe in scientific replicability, right? The fact that scientist academics get paid more than I do as a humanist, right? We value them more. We value that way of knowing more. And I think that sometimes kind of the existential crisis for us is like, should we? Should we? Or like, don't we continually get messages about relationships should matter more than profit or whatever? So I don't know. I mean, peer review is certainly important, but then there's also something that is exclusionary about that because it's a hierarchy, right?
Oh yeah, I
Because
guess so.
totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, with this stuff, peer review doesn't even work anyway. Like, because I feel like you need some type of physical proof. Oh my goodness, what do you think about like implants?
So, Stanton Friedman recently died. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, he wasn't like a good friend, but I definitely talked to him on Facebook and stuff. Or was it Facebook? I think I might have emailed him.
I think implants. I don't have a super hard impression about implants. I don't have a super hard impression about most everything, because what's happened for me is, as I research abductions, people send me information all the time. People send me so much information. People send me their diaries. People send me drawings. People send me medical records. People send me doctor's notes. And I'm just like, I am not about proven or disproven this. Like, I can't. And I'm about your story and like what's in your story and what are the parts of your story and what parts of your story did the experts, did David Jacobs, John Mack, John Fuller, what did they determine is a real abduction? Like, really? And so whose abductions might not be counted or whose experiences might not be counted. So with implants, I don't know, right? I know that our culture has had a fascination with surveillance. I know that, especially with the rise of the internet and with technology, surveillance and kind of the constant accessibility of people, coupled with the increasing feelings of insignificance because of technology, making it so that we're obsolete. A computer can do most of everything we can better, and we can see the entire world all at once. And like, so like this COVID thing, for example, like, I don't have to just worry about my little community and who has a cold, right? I see the whole world, and I see images of refrigerator trucks in New York, and like, that makes me panic.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't know. I think that implants, for me, when people talk about implants and they talk about the significance of the implant, and it's about surveillance and it's about being surveilled, and it's a way for people to articulate a lot of anxiety about surveillance in the government and distrust and all that kind of stuff. But again, that's like the realness of it. what's the truth of it? I don't know. I've had people send me, pictures, and they've sent me x-rays, but I mean,
Oh,
I don't know.
I have definitely gotten a lot of pictures, X-rays, you name it, about people who have had implants. I've had people say that they are some type of tracking device where,
Mm-hmm.
like, this implant will give the aliens a way to try to find them again whenever they're just
Mm-hmm.
out in public. I've heard like all kinds of interesting theories about that, but to me, an implant means you were abducted, you were taken on board a craft, you were experimented on, and then dropped back off. That's a common thing with people who have been abducted, but in all reality, why did that person get chosen? And what makes them special to get that implant? What is it about them specifically that made the aliens want to scoop them up and put an implant in them? Like, I don't get that. I don't understand that. That's the thing I don't understand about abductions overall. Like, what makes this person special,
Right.
and why were they chosen? Why were they the ones who were
Well, and
abducted?
it's interesting because yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And the thing is, like, so this is one of the questions that I care about the most, in the sense that um, I want to interview a random sample of all people who claim these experiences, right? But there are going to be certain people who are more likely to come forward. And so when we do all the demographic information about who's been abducted, we say that we have this demographic kind of picture, but those are just the people that are willing to talk about it. Like, I want to talk about I want to talk to the people who have had these anomalous experiences, who haven't told anyone. Like, first, I hope they're not suffering, obviously, in keeping this, but I want to talk to them because I'm like, ooh, who are they? um but the
Well, I
implants
know
thing.
two people like that. I know two people that I can say that I'm confident that I'm the only person that they've talked to about their experience. One
Mm-hmm.
person was very close to me. She basically thought that as an infant, uh, she was abducted out of her crib and then
Mm-hmm.
taken away and then brought back. The really interesting thing about that is uh, her parents, which are academics, they're professors, or one of them is, uh, remember that. They remember
Mm-hmm.
like hearing her crying and remember her like having like issues, around that day, and this is her as an infant. So she ended up going and doing some hypnosis, and that hypnosis made her it made her believe that there was these entities then coming in. And I know that she recorded that hypno session, whatever the heck you want to call it. So I'm going to see if I can get that and listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm really curious to see if that hypnotist does what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
this suggestion thing, like, were the aliens green? Like, were they like putting thoughts into her
it's
head? Or
really It's really, really hard to get a hypnotist who doesn't ask leading questions. I mean, they exist for sure, but and the degree to which memory is not retrievable in the way that we rewind a cassette tape, and the kind of idea that it is also makes hypnosis kind of problematic. But I was going to say about implants, that, and in terms of being special. Um, I know that most of the people that I have interviewed and continue to correspond with, they are oftentimes generational abductees. So their parents will have been experiencers, their children, etc. Like, it's usually within families. I have several family groups. Like, I have a mother and a son, and I have a husband. I have several husband and wives who do, to a certain degree, verify each other's experiences, right? With, like you're saying, with your friend. Like, I have one woman, she was abducted. Her husband totally remembers it. Like, he got up, went and sat on the couch and waited for her to get back, kind of thing. Um, so so I don't know, like, I don't know who get selected, that's one of the questions that I ask people. I'm like, do you have any idea why you were selected? And selected is leading in my asking of it. But they talk about sometimes reasons for selection are considered to be consequence of abduction, and sometimes they're the reason. So, for example, I had one woman who had psychic. She said she was kind of psychic and she could kind of intuit things. You know, she was much more in touch intuitively, which is a lot of experiencers say that. Some of them say that's the reason they're selected, and some of them say that's a consequence of the actual experience, right? Like that's a power that they're then invested with, or that they are encouraged to grow. So I don't know. I've also talked to people. There was a man in Florida and another woman out west somewhere who teach people how to avoid abductions and how to stop abductions. Yeah. And so I have a couple different people. I have several who like fight with aliens over whether or not they're going. I have a couple who, yeah, oh, definitely. And I have a couple women who the extraterrestrials will come and they'll be like, I cannot tonight. Like, I just cannot. And the aliens will leave them and like just come back a different time because they're being, I mean, like over 80% of the people that I've worked with have been abducted multiple times, right? Like very rarely is someone have a single episode. And so, yeah, I've had people who like will kick and bite at the extraterrestrials. I have one woman who bit an alien. I've had people who like fight it off. Some of them fight it off religiously, you know, with Jesus, and they pray or whatever. And others like fight it off with just the power of their mind. And so I don't know. I had one person who wrote to me and said that like the aliens started to take him and then they said that they didn't want him. But I don't know if that was legit because the verification on that was a little sketchy.
Yeah. Oh, I just love all of these alien abduction stories. I think they're really cool. And I'm just waiting for that one, that golden ticket, you know, like that one is like, yeah, you know, I know him. He's a buddy of mine. He can come down here and we'll take you up into his craft, you know, like, because I know people who claim that they can summon these things as well. So like,
yep.
I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of characters, and some of them are believable, you know, and I've actually went out with some of these people and they've tried to summon stuff and they weren't able to, but they were like, oh, it's just, you know, the wrong night or something. But I want to check that out.
I did a preparation for contact workshop with Stephen Greer, I think his name is. He was really active, or at least he was for a while, with the Leo Sprinkles Experiencer Conference out in Wyoming. And I signed up for this preparation for contact workshop where like we went through these kind of exercises of kind of, you know, just breathing and getting in harmony with the group and stuff. And like, I'm skeptical of all kinds of stuff like that, despite the fact that I do it. But anyway, but I'm going along certainly with an open mind. And then we went out to a space in Wyoming and they kind of tried to summon extraterrestrials, but we couldn't. But what happened was, that's right, I had totally forgotten about this till I was telling you the story. So I went out to the middle of nowhere, kind of scared out of my mind, trying to summon UFOs. Didn't see anything. So then I went back. I had been afraid, but then I went back kind of sad. When we got back to the dorms, we were staying at the University of Wyoming dorms. When we got back to the dorms, they had seen a UFO at the dorms. I know. So I was like, we were summoning them. They clearly went to the wrong place.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you should have just stayed there.
I know.
It's so funny. So I want to get to one last question. We're doing great here. This hour flew by.
I know.
Marion
really
wants
fast.
to know. What's that?
It went really fast. I was thinking about all the things I didn't say about all the people I've talked to.
Oh, I know. We could probably go on for hours. So I do find her question fascinating. So what do you think about the Skinwalker Ranch story and the alien abductions and things associated?
I know. I am going to not comment on that until I do more research because I don't know. I haven't even seen the show. There's evidently a movie.
Yeah. There's like a weekly show. Yeah.
Oh, is it a week? I haven't seen the show, so I need to see the show.
Skinwalker Ranch to me is fascinating. So Skinwalker Ranch to me is about the skinwalkers. It's more about the native lore. Pooh.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, Marion. I don't know enough to say anything without sounding, well, not even sounding stupid, but I don't know enough.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to friend her.
I always
I'm gonna walk back to her.
Yeah, everybody sees these skinwalkers, and when you talk to the natives there, they believe these skinwalkers are spirits, essentially, you know. Mm-hmm. But other people claim that they are aliens, and there has been a lot of UFO sightings there. There's been even like a lot of Bigfoot sightings there. It's kind of like this weird hotspot where like everything seems to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Hellmouth.
Yes, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of the Conjuring House a little bit. So like the Conjuring House is weird. So basically it's had like all kinds of things cited around it, even like Bigfoot's close and like definitely UFOs. But this is something if you start doing a lot more research or really starting to talk to people, ask them about the land they're at. So I have this theory where like I think that magnetic fields have something to do with people seeing ghosts or seeing UFOs or any of these other kind of weird things out there. I'm very convinced that magnetic fields have the ability to mess with your brain. We do these things in ghost hunting where we basically use this EMF meters, electromagnetic field thing. So it picks up magnetic fields. So that's how people like find ghosts. They use these things to find electromagnetic fields. So if and this is true at the Conjuring House. So the Conjuring House sits on land that is I don't know what it is really. It's all like metal. Like I took a metal detector out there, and the whole place, like everywhere, it goes off. There's not a piece of land around that place that doesn't have a magnetic field. So if you think about it, like start putting that into your research a little bit. Start like looking to see if like there's some kind of magnetic anomaly close by that could cause somebody to have these issues.
Well, I mean, people certainly talk about that, right? And then they talk about the fact that electronics malfunction when they're around, which could also be related in the sense that they can't wear watches, or cars malfunction, or lights malfunction, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I totally forget what I was going to say.
Yeah, just check it out. Like start looking around the magnetic fields.
There was that guy. I think his name was Lawson. I want to say it was Persinger, but I don't think it was Persinger. I think it was Lawson, who did a scientific study where he put electrodes on people's brains, and when certain parts of the brain are stimulated, it can absolutely replicate an abduction encounter. And and that's like an old study. So the idea that our brains can be stimulated or do get stimulated, right? If they can be stimulated externally, then certainly something like, a certain field or whatever could plausibly do it. But I don't know, because then there's that other thing that I always say I need to double check. But like, allegedly, when sightings of UFOs increase, so too do sightings of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so, and so the kind of correlation between these anomalous, pseudo-faithful kind of apparitions, I think is interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I don't understand why they would be connected in any way. It's weird.
Unless it is something else, right? And that people are in particular conditions, and then they see what is culturally appropriate or dominant for them. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
a lot of unanswered questions.
There really are. So where do you see yourself, like, 10 years down the line? Are you going to keep doing this? Are you going to still be the UFO girl? And what's your end game? Like, what is your goal?
So, I think this is interesting because this is a new end game for me. So I think I want to write the book. The name of the book is What's Up, alien abductions and why they matter. So I thought that was kind of clever.
Yeah.
I want to write that up, right? And kind of talk about narrative and why we tell stories and what these stories are and the significance of the stories. And I guess I also want to continue doing kind of politically inclined research that looks at public discourse and how, because like I really care about like sexual assault narratives, for example, and how do we get to a place as a society where we can tell, an individual can tell a story that is believed in a way that is appropriate. So I want to keep working on both of those things. So I guess in 10 years, I would see myself still, collecting stories from whatever group of people aren't believed, whatever group of people have to kind of struggle to have a voice, because as an academic, I can totally give them a voice, right? I'm judicious in what I claim to believe because I have to be, but to definitely give a voice to people who usually can't be heard and to have them taken seriously, I think. And also to help people learn how to evaluate evidence or how to be skeptical and kind at the same time.
I think that's great. That's a great goal. It's really helping people. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
We gotta be we're not people.
Then what's our purpose? Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Stephanie, for hanging out with me today on the Operation Lockdown. I hope that the rest of your lockdown goes good, and stay in touch. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
You should do that Netflix party and watch some groovy show, and everybody can watch it all at the same time. Have you seen that, the Netflix party?
No.
He's like, what are you talking about? Netflix party is just it's like a browser extension. And so if you had yours on and I had mine on, then we would be watching the same show at the same time, but it gives us a chat box on the right, so we could write back and forth to each other.
That is cool.
It's totally cool, because then when you're watching, you can be like, oh, I heard this about Travis Walton, or I heard this about the rancher. I heard,
Yeah, that's a great idea. That would be fun.
Good to get like-minded people to do.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to do that. It sounds really cool. All right, Stephanie, take care of yourself, girl. And I will see you sometime.
Okay.
All right. Later.
Bye.